Okay, I think we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this live Q&A happening after the screening of the Deep Web film. First of all, I just want to thank everybody who participated in the screening. I believe we have over 100 events going on campuses all across the United States. So thank you to members of Students for Liberty, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and Young Americans for Liberty for all putting these events together. We're really excited to have this going. My name is Stephen Duke. I'm the North American Events Manager at Students for Liberty, and I am joined with some very fantastic guests. First, we have Lyn Ulbricht, mother of Ross, and someone who's really been at the forefront fighting for Ross's freedom and ultimately for justice in a system that is quite unjust. And very excited as well to have the director of the Deep Web documentary here, Alex Winter. So thank both of you for coming on this live stream Q&A.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
Of course.
So grateful.
Well, absolutely. So thanks everybody who watched the film. Hope it was very impactful. I know it was when I first watched it. And so we're going to dive in with some questions, a mix of questions that we put together and questions that y'all have been able to submit using the hashtag #DeepWebScreening. So thank you for everyone who submitted questions. And we are going to make our way through as many questions as possible with a 30-minute timeline that we have. So just to start things off, a question for you, Lyn. A lot has happened with Ross's case since the documentary was released to the general public. So I'm just wondering if, to start us out, if you can kind of catch us up on where things have gone since the documentary ended and left off and kind of where we are now.
Absolutely. First, I want to say, though, that just a little while ago, Ross called from prison, which I never know when he's going to call. And I said, hey, Ross, guess where I'm going? I'm going to go talk to all of these people and all these campuses. And he goes, oh, wow, cool. That's happening tonight, because I had told him about it. And he was just wanted to give you all a shout out and say, thank you so much for watching the film and for supporting us. And also, he said, hey, it reminds me of when I was at Penn State and I'd do these film events about liberty and about different big issues. So he's just really, he's with you here in spirit and really appreciates it. Yeah, a whole lot has happened since the end of the film. And I just want to touch on a few of the major things because they're important. At the end of the film where it mentioned the corrupt agents and how they had stolen, I don't know if it mentioned exactly how much, but it was over $1 million. And, but what is really, I think, significant is that they were computer experts. That was their job, they were the core of the investigation in Maryland, and that was their job. And in fact, one of them, Sean Bridges, was not only a computer forensic expert, he worked for the NSA. He was working for the NSA at the time that he was investigating Silk Road, and he was a dark net expert as well. And they basically had high-level admin access to the entire site and server. They had what one journalist called the keys to the kingdom. So, and the other thing about Sean Bridges is he has a history of framing people. Forgot that part. In any case, they had the ability to change passwords, PIN numbers, commandeer accounts. They could act as other accounts, including DPR. They could act as DPR. They had access to bank accounts, keys. They could manipulate, edit, change the forum on the marketplace and on, chats on the forum and marketplace. They basically had the keys to the kingdom. And what's shocking about this is that this material they had access to for many, many months was not allowed to be known to the jury that these guys even existed. The defense fought this and said this is important evidence. It's corrupt agents are using their access to not only steal, but potentially alter the evidence. And the judge sided with the prosecution and suppressed this. And so the jury never even knew they existed. It came out 2 months after trial. And this is a big point in the appeal because it's in direct violation of a very well-established law called the Brady Rule, which says you cannot suppress evidence favorable to a defendant. That is against the law. So that's a huge, huge part of the appeal. And our lawyers said, you know, we only know the tip of the iceberg of this corruption. It was what they believe, and I agree. And it's obvious to me because there's still many encrypted emails, sealed evidence, undisclosed evidence. The government doesn't necessarily even know the extent of the corruption. I personally think there's more agents that were corrupt, and I'm not the only one. Other people have come out. One of them was very involved in the investigation of one of the agents, and he said he definitely believes there are other people. So there's a whole lot more that we don't know about this, and it's very widely, you know, potentially widely affecting all of this case. Then what happened also after the trial was, of course, the barbaric sentence issued by Judge Forrest of double life without parole plus 40 years. Ross is completely nonviolent. All the charges were nonviolent. And this was just an outrageous, raw abuse of government power, in my opinion. It's in defiance of the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. It's definitely cruel. It's a very unusual sentence for nonviolent first offender. It is in defiance of the Sentencing Reform Act, which was passed that said that a judge should not impose a sentence, that it's okay to impose a sentence that's sufficient, but no longer than necessary. She never gave a reason why this unbelievable sentence was necessary in the case of Ross. And, you know, but why? Why not? And you know, of course, the whole case is supposedly about drugs and all that. And people had said to me, well, do you think it's political? And I initially was like, well, I don't want to overstate it. And then I've come around to thinking, yes, it's political. One of the reasons is because the biggest drug dealer on Silk Road, who was convicted of that, got 10 years. The biggest heroin and cocaine dealer on Silk Road got 5 years. These people sold huge quantities of drugs, according to the government. They're not saying Ross even sold drugs. One of the high-level admins, Peter Nash, got 17 months, not even 2 years. And he's out and he's free, and I'm glad. But point being, there's no comparison. There's this huge, grotesque disparity between Ross's sentence and these other people. And a guy recently who was convicted of running Silk Road 2.0, he got 8 years. The corrupt agents got 6 and 7 years. Ross gets double life without parole. And I was asking myself, why? If it's about drugs. And I realized it's about the platform. It's not about a product. It's about a platform. And I believe that this platform, which operated on Tor, was beyond government control and used cryptocurrency, was threatening to the government. And they basically said that. The judge said, since you broke the law in this way, you have to pay. And since you're the first, you have to pay. You have to be an example. And there is no law saying that the first offender of anything gets a worse sentence than the next guy at all. This is just what she said. And the other thing that came up politically that made me think this is because of some of the statements the judge made at sentencing. And in fact, the appeal points out First Amendment violations, freedom of speech, because she referenced Ross's political beliefs, the Silk Road site's political philosophy, different posts on there that she said, not that necessarily Ross wrote, that she said were dangerous and troubling. And she thought that she wasn't sure he had given up his political beliefs. And so apparently to make sure, she was going to put him away for life and let him die in prison, partially because of his political beliefs. Now, this woman took an oath to uphold the First Amendment and protect political speech. So this is a very serious issue in the sentencing. And I can go on. There's so much to this, but I'll just point out the last thing that's happened, which is, of course, with this outrageous trial, which was unfair, and I can go into all that. There's so many points. Besides the suppression of the corruption evidence, there's a lot more. And this unbelievable sentence, which is so excessive, Ross is appealing it. So we're in the middle of the appeal, and actually oral arguments, which is the final stage before the court deliberates, the appellate court deliberates on this, is happening a week from this Thursday. So October 6th in New York City is when the appeal oral arguments are. And just to touch on a few points in the appeal besides the suppression, cross-examination of government witnesses was either curtailed or flatly denied. This is a point in the appeal. You have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to cross-examine witnesses, and that was denied. Defense witnesses who Ross's lawyer wanted to bring to court were not allowed to testify about Bitcoin, about technical issues, and they weren't allowed to testify and explain to the jury why the government's testimony was flawed. This is a point in the appeal because it's in flagrant violation of Fifth and Sixth Amendment that says you have due process rights. You have the right to defend yourself. Mm-hmm. And then another big point, and I'll wrap it up. I know I'm going on, but just to touch on the high points, this is important, is Fourth Amendment issues. Because the warrants used for Ross's laptop and social media accounts were general warrants, and the Fourth Amendment requires particularity. You can't just go rummaging around in someone's house from attic to basement to see what you can find, and you shouldn't be able to rummage around in their digital house either. And actually, the appeal's been joined by the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, who say unconstitutional warrants with Ross's laptop and social media. And the government's saying, well, no, it's digital, it doesn't count. It's not a physical desk, it's not a physical file cabinet. And as we all know, a computer is a file cabinet on steroids. It's a gateway to all kinds of information. So this is a very important point and issue for the digital age. Because are we giving up our privacy because we keep our lives now on computers instead of in file cabinets? So this has all happened since the end of the film, and it's continuing. It's an ongoing saga.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for catching us up in as much time as you could. I know there's so many moving pieces to that, but much appreciated. So the next question we have is for Alex. So people tend to have they have opinions of Ross's case, either on one side or the other. A lot of that has to do with kind of the media and how they kind of maybe swung the case or things like that. And the things that you read about the case maybe before seeing this documentary could sway you in one direction or the other. So how did you approach making this documentary, knowing that, the visceral reaction that a lot of people had when Ross was first arrested and the case was first starting out, in order to kind of frame it appropriately, given what's actually happening with this case?
Yeah, I think can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. I've been having a tech issue on this end with the Google Hangouts. Sorry about that. Well, when you set out to make a documentary, A, you don't exactly know what you're going to find. And B, I know for myself that I'm not looking to answer a question that I already know the answer to. And in some cases, I don't even know the question. And this case is really a conundrum, as Lyn so eloquently stated earlier. So, I knew it was going to be a movie that didn't have an easy answer. And I was most interested in looking at all of the facets around the issues so that people could, A, ask themselves more questions. I don't think that people were going to come out of the movie with solid answers. I think that, if I had done my job properly, you'd come out of the movie with more questions than you thought you would have around the issues of the dark net and cryptography and black markets and Bitcoin, and certainly the trial in the case of Ross. So, I was interested in creating more questions. I was interested in digging into the ramifications of these issues from a bunch of different directions because it's a multifaceted issue. But I certainly was not interested in sort of, having an agenda, or I wasn't that premeditated. I mean, I didn't go into it with that kind of premeditation. So I certainly had opinions, you know, as I went along. I'm human. But it wasn't sort of a film like I'm setting out to tell this story with this agenda. That never crossed my mind, because I started making the movie around the time Ross was arrested, maybe a little bit before, and I knew very little about the details that I knew by the end.
Gotcha. Well, I think you did do your job in that regard. I think the film is really great for kind of, you know, you leaving it with more questions than answers, and you start reading into the case and reading into the details, which I think is really important for people to kind of come to their own conclusions on where things lie. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And as both of you alluded to with your various answers, I think and this question I think could be for both of you, if both of you have input on this. I think one of the most striking things about Ross's case is, like you both said, how it intersects not just drug policy, which on the surface level, that's a huge part of it, you know, which is very much in need of reform, but also, you know, issues like you mentioned, privacy, surveillance, Fourth Amendment rights, Bitcoin, what's going on, you know, on the dark net, things like that. So can you maybe speak to like the various implications the case can or will have in these other areas of policy? What sorts of precedents might be set or already have been set with this case that people should know about?
Lyn, do you want to take that to start?
Yeah, I can start that. And it's very important because Ross's lawyer said that it's traditional for the government to use high-profile cases like this one to make bad law that trickle down and impact all of us going forward. So this isn't just about Ross. It's not just about drugs or Silk Road or any of that. It's way bigger ramifications. Of course, there's the issue of fair trials, which I touched on. There's political speech being used against people, which I touched on. Another thing is that most of the evidence in the trial was digital. There weren't witnesses saying, I saw Ross do this, or Ross hired me to do this, or anything. It was digital. And I've been told by many experts it's very vulnerable to tampering, manipulation, editing, planting, and other courts have thrown it out. Mortgage companies won't take a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily changed it is. And yet this court, Catherine Forrest, put a man away for life based on that kind of flimsy evidence. And whether you believe it or not, it lowers the standard of evidence, and that's a precedent. Another one is transferred intent, which is blaming or holding responsible someone for someone else's actions. In this case, it's a website host. In Federal Express's case, they were criminally indicted because other people used FedEx to send illegal pharmaceuticals. This is a very highly expansive technique, basically, that the government is using now that's quite alarming. And then I talked about the Fourth Amendment, and you can get a whole lot more into that and how it applies to the digital age. There's also the question of this barbaric sentence for nonviolent, and of course our prisons are overflowing with nonviolent people now, which is a whole other issue, the criminal justice system. And then there's and Alex might want to discuss hacking a foreign server without a warrant, which is covered in the movie, you know, and that under oath, an FBI agent made an explanation that around the world experts cried foul and said, there's no way it happened the way he's saying. So those are some precedents.
Yeah, I think that that's all really, you know, as I'm sure you gathered from watching the movie, Lyn, is a hard act to follow. So that was all extremely well said. She knows the ins and outs of all of this. And only thing I would add to that is that, you know, there are general issues that the Silk Road and Ross's case hit upon. And I would say, sort of going beyond some of the issues that Lyn stated, you know, the general issues are just how are we dealing with the drug war, which is clearly a failure and winding down. Absolutely. How are we dealing with the, you know, privatization of prisons and the overpopulation of prisons of nonviolent, mostly drug offenders, mostly minority, it should be said. You know, how are we dealing with laws in the digital age where the laws haven't caught up to law enforcement, meaning, you know, laws around search and seizure, which are, you know, being breached continually. We've had, you know, people fighting back, even the Supreme Court, trying to keep our cell phones protected, trying to keep our laptops protected. You know, people often rebut the notion that we should be protecting our privacy with the old, flogging the dead horse. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, which of course isn't true, because your entire life is in the digital space today. So if somebody is breaching the digital space, they might as well be walking into your house, or they might as well honestly be attacking your person. So it isn't just about privacy and this idea of having some sense of being a civilized human being with the right to close a door, which of course we have that as well. It goes far beyond that. So then I think beyond the general, you get into, and I'll keep this short, you get into the specifics, because I think, as students, this is all stuff that you either know or could dig into quite easily. Ross's case hit at the intersection of three of the most contentious areas of law today, which is drugs and the drug war, and cyber, over prosecution in the cyberspace and misuse of digital rights, and financial regulation through the Bitcoin issue. So, having been tried, and I know this is painful for Lyn to say, but I say it because it's important. When I first started researching the story, Ross had been arrested in San Francisco, and I remember, I know a lot of people high up the food chain, both in law and in the digital world. When Ross was being moved to the Southern District of New York, everyone I know was like, he's screwed.
That's right.
Because that is not only the seat of the cyber divisions of New York, it is also the seat of Wall Street, obviously. And it has always been customarily a very pro-drug war state in terms of prosecution, very conservative in its prosecution. So Ross was really, stuck at the intersection of three areas that are already potentially over-prosecuted in this country. So there was the sad expectation they would throw the book at him. I think that we were all quite shocked, including people who didn't side with the Ulbrichts on this story, that he was given a sentence that went beyond even what the prosecutors asked for. So it really played out in a way like my worst nightmare, that having been brought to that district in New York, he really was meted out a very unfair sentence. And I think that's where there was room for appeal. That's where there's room for resentencing at worst. And as Lyn said, there are people who are getting involved now. I think the sentence woke a lot of people up who may have been put off by drugs or the media spin on what happened, that are now coming to the support of this case.
Absolutely, and that's great to see. So we want to fit in one question before we get to the final question that was user submitted. This was submitted by John Goodnight, a student who had tweeted us using the hashtag, and it's for Lyn. If you could speak directly to policymakers, what would you tell them? You could tell about the case, about what's going on with Silk Road and Ross.
Well, I've just seen the overreach of government up close and personal through this case, and I'm very concerned about it. I feel like our government's too big. It's taking liberties it doesn't have authority to take. I think that's very clear in the drug war. Obviously, it's not about drugs, or they would have done something that works after 40 years and $1 trillion. And so apparently it's about government expansion and control. The whole criminal justice system is a travesty. It's a disgrace. And I think that basically, overall, in all kinds of areas, not just this case is like one, it's not unique. That's the frightening thing. It's not unique. We are losing our freedoms very rapidly. And I would like to see policymakers start undoing and unraveling all of the government controls that are intruding into people's lives, their privacy, and, persecuting a lot of people. So that's what I've really come to. And through this case especially, I've seen up close and personal how the government operates, how they go after people, and what they do. And I could go into that for hours. And and I've seen the devastation in the prisons because I go there all the time, and I know the families. They're not statistics to me because I'm one of them. We're in this together, and it's. I'm very concerned about what's happening to our country and how I feel like we're at a crossroads in history. And right now, it's a pivotal time. So are we going to go down the road to innovation, more freedom, an exciting future? Or are we going to go down that road to government control and suppression, really, and expansion? And it's our choice. It's our future. And that's what of course, I want us to go down the freedom road.
Absolutely.
So,
well, thank you. And so I think what the biggest question that many of us have, and a lot of people had submitted this as well, is what can we do as students, as private citizens, as individuals, and as chapters, all over the country and all over the world, really, to help with this case? Where can we donate? Are there volunteer opportunities, things that we can do on college campuses to get the word out? I know you mentioned the hearing on October 6th. Is that open to the public? Can people come support Ross? So maybe you could expand on all that.
Absolutely, and thanks for asking that. We have a website, freeross.org. It has lots of opportunities on there, all different kinds. We're just a family. We need a grassroots support, and we need a lot of help. So yes, donate. It's so expensive to fight for justice in this country. It is shocking, really. And that's one of the ways people are crushed and can't. But if, we've tried to make different options. For instance, Ross came up with an idea. We've already done one art piece that he did in prison, and we've got a new one now. It's an art game where for $1, you click and can reveal part of the picture, and over time it's revealed. And you might win a silver dollar, because thanks to Roberts and Roberts, they have put scattered silver dollars, and just to play that game, and it helps us. If you go to, you can shop online. If you link through a link on our page, it'll take you, and we'll get a little percent. It's like an affiliate marketing thing. There is a tax deductible option through American Black Cross, which helps defend American prisoners, and Ross's Appeal is one of their projects. We have a store where if you order something, I will actually ship it to you personally. And we have an action page, which has all kinds of ideas. And really, this whole event, after I had this conversation with Stephen, I said, we just had this idea, and here we are. It's so exciting. And there's a volunteer form that you can click and tell us your skills. And we have people saying, hey, I'll help with tech, or I'll help with social medias and other things, sharing on social media, follow us, share our posts, that kind of thing. And in a couple of months, we're going to have, there's another group that they came up with the idea of having a Rossathon, like a Jerry Lewis telethon used to be. I don't know if you guys are too young to remember. But anyway, to raise awareness and funds, and actually Students for Liberty and Young Americans for Liberty and Students for Sensible Drug Policy and other representatives, Alex, great speakers, Roger Ver, Doug Casey, Jesse Ventura, different people are going to speak. And Tatiana Moroz, different people in the Bitcoin space and Liberty space. So that'll be a fun event to raise awareness and help us pay one bill, just one bill, which comes to $14,000. And it's not a lawyer bill. It's a bill to bind the appeal so the judges can read it. Can you believe that? Anyway, that's what it costs. And so there's all these different ways, and they don't have to cost money. Of course, we need money, but they don't have to cost money. And we just really appreciate it. We need help. We really do. And so please do. Please look at us. Yeah.
And what are the details on the oral arguments? You said October 6th?
Yeah, October 6th at 10 a.m. And we actually have a events little section on our homepage and drop-down box. And it'll have all the different events. And that's on there. And it's open to the public. Please wear a jacket and tie, professional clothing, whatever. Look very respectable. And, show support that, this is it's just good to do that in the courtroom.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. But please come and support us. And if you can, and it's very quick. It's a pretty quick thing. They only get 10 minutes or a little more to each side to talk about, answer questions from the judges.
Wow. So that's in New York. So anybody who is in New York City, anybody who's in that area, definitely check that out and see if you can make it out to show Ross and his family some support. So that'd be fantastic. Well, I think that's about all the time we have. thank you both so much
Thank
for coming
you.
on. Of course, but we were just so happy to have you and have this event all across the nation. So really, really appreciate it. And I'm assuming we can keep our eye out for more, news about the case and keep everyone in the loop. And hopefully everyone who watched this documentary can share it and show it to your friends and family.
Yes,
I know I
please
definitely
do.
did that. And it's a very impactful, very good film. And so make sure that you're sharing this film with as many people as you can, and continuing to have events to support the message of personal liberty and freedom and ending the drug war. So thanks again to Students for Liberty, Young Americans for Liberty, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, chapter members and student leaders. And again, of course, thank you so much, Lyn and Alex, for joining us.
Thank you guys. Seriously,
soon.
thank you so
thank
much.
you.
And thanks to everybody who joined in on this.
Thanks,
It's
Alex.
very much appreciated.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thank you all for watching.